Hello and welcome to the second video on our series on the effect of demand shocks on employment. We are following a couple of papers by Professors Mian and Sufi. In the second video, we're going to be talking about the data that they're going to be using for this paper. In order to see what the impact is of changes in net worth on employment, we're going to need a lot of data that's very detailed across different geographical areas. The geographical areas we're going to be using are counties in the US. We're of course going to be needing data on household net worth. I'm going to define what net worth is in the next slide. And then we're going to be needing data on employment by industry. That's because different industries are affected differently by changes in demand. This is the discussion we were having about tradable versus non-tradable industries. And we're going to need changes in wages at the county level. So together, this data is going to let us talk about how changes in net worth affect employment differentially across industries and across places, that's the counties. So what is net worth? Net worth is the wealth of households, and here we're going to care about the total wealth of households in a given location. And so the total wealth of households is going to include stocks, the bonds, the value of their housing, net of the value of their debt. The value for both stocks and bonds is going to come from the IRS. The IRS is the tax collection agency for the US, and they publish the statistics of income where they report the total amount of dividends and interest income received by households in every zip code in the US. Then we can aggregate zip codes to counties. Now, there is some process of assigning how from the dividends we can know the value of the stocks that the households have. And the details are, of course, in the paper, but they're not going to be super critical for what we're going to do. What matters here is that we do have access to data on the value of the financial assets of households for every location. Now, the next step is going to be to have access to value of housing. Housing is going to be important because we're going to get the changes in net worth from changes in the value of housing. So we're going to be using the 2000 decennial census and then an index of house prices. The level H for net worth, that is going to be the housing wealth, it's going to be the product of the number of homeowners and the median home value for the location. And we're going to be having to project these indices in a certain way, but just as before with the stocks, the specifics of how they do it are not of particular interest for what we're going to be doing in this course, but it is important for you to know that there is some imputation going on because we don't really observe the value of every single house that is in the US. Instead, what we're going to have is an imputation of the series for the price of houses across different locations. Then the final part of net worth is debt, which the authors are going to get from Equifax. So Equifax, which is a risk rating agency, it's going to provide this information that's going to include total borrowing by households in every zip code. And so the same way that the IRS is going to give them the value of all stocks and bonds, these are going to be financial assets, through Equifax, they can know the value of all debt. Okay, so that together is going to give us net worth. Now, the thing we want is to know changes in net worth that we're later going to argue are exogenous. That means that these changes come from variation in things outside of our model. And so here what we're going to be using is changes in net worth due to changes in housing prices. We don't want to use changes in net worth that come from, say, stocks, because we know that the value of the stocks is going to respond to other shocks, to other changes in the economy. So we want to concentrate on changes due to changes in prices. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to hold fix the level of housing at the 2006 level, and we're going to focus on what will have been the change in net worth due to only changes in the price. We're going to discuss later how we can exploit variation across different counties to get at an exogenous relationship between the exogenous component of the changes in prices and the change in employment. Now, it is also important to know that this change in housing net worth is not only large when prices vary a lot, but also if initial net worth is very low. So this is going to be relevant for taking care of counties that have very high leverage. That means that they have a lot of debt. So they talk about this in the paper a little bit, but I just thought it was a good thing to note here in like what are the issues that we face when we actually go and look at the data. Now, the next step in the terms of the data we need is data on industries. So the county business patterns data, as its name kind of shows, it's giving you data on businesses by county, exactly what we need. In particular, it's going to tell us the number of employees and how much those employees are being paid for every type of industries. So every industry has a code, and what we want is to get the industries, every code, into one of four categories. These categories are going to be industries that are clearly non-tradable, clearly tradable, that are construction. Construction is different because it is linked to houses. And so we want to treat it separately from other industries. And then we have some industries that we cannot classify into these other categories. We're going to hold them separate. Okay, we want to focus now on the non-tradable and tradable industries. Of course, we're going to have other data that's going to complement this to give us hourly wage data. That's going to be important. Now, we want to be able to tell apart which industries are tradable and which are non-tradable. We're going to be using two different definitions of what makes a tradable and non-tradable industry. The first one, it's going to have to do with literally trade. So if an industry is tradable, we will expect that they trade with other countries as well. So if they have exports and imports that are high, either relative to the number of employees they have or just high in absolute value of exports and imports, then we're going to think, well, you look like a tradable industry. On the other hand, non-tradable industries are industries where we cannot trade with other countries. So retail and restaurants are going to be typical non-tradable industries. You can think of retail as a Walmart or as a Best Buy, and restaurants, of course, any example will work. The other way to think about what makes a tradable or non-tradable industries is actually a very clever point made by the authors. We can use geographic concentration of industries to identify which industries are tradable and which are not. Non-tradable industries cannot be concentrated. They have to be everywhere. So if you think like your hairdresser, there has to be hairdressers everywhere. There has to be restaurants everywhere. There has to be grocery stores everywhere. They cannot be concentrated on a single place because you need them exactly where the demand is. Tradable industries, on the other hand, because you can trade the goods and services they have, you can concentrate them and have them all clustered in the same place. So goods and services can later be shipped where demand is after they are produced. And this is the case, for example, with car manufacturers, which are typically concentrated in hubs where there are many car manufacturing plants relatively close together. This is also the case with the financial sector. They provide services that are tradable, and you can see that there is a large cluster of the financial sector in large cities like New York or Chicago, but they don't need to be everywhere. So using geographic data on the location of different industries, the authors can assign which industries are closer together as being tradable, the industries that have to be everywhere as being non-tradable. The last thing I want to show you is some examples of tradable and non-tradable industries. So here you can see plastic manufacturers, software publishers, pharmaceutical and medicine manufacturers. So you can see manufacturing is something that very typically can be traded. They are gonna mostly compose this category. On the other hand, categories that are non-tradable, you have full-service restaurants, grocery stores, shoe stores, florists. So you're gonna have all these different categories that are either in retail or restaurants or certain types of services that are specific, you cannot move them around. So you have like gasoline stores as well, health and personal care stores. So we were talking about hairdressers, they will like be in this 4461 category. Okay, with this we have the data we need. Again, it's data on the net worth, changes in that net worth that are originated in changes in house prices, and then data on industries and employment that are going to let us to tell apart the part of employment that is sensitive to local demand, that's going to be non-tradable employment, from the part of employment that shouldn't be sensible to local demand and that should respond to aggregate or national demand conditions, and that's going to be the tradable sector. Thanks.